a lot.
Yeah. Seen everywhere and everybody's
Their normal spot.
but it's
She'll have to get
everybody. How are you? Good to see your smiling faces. Welcome back to our final day of lectures with Father Greg Boyle. It feels sad to say that this is our last day together, doesn't it? I know I'm not alone when I say that the stories of Feline and Jorge and Father Greg have left me feeling challenged, encouraged, and hopeful. But I don't want it to simply be a feeling. I want my change of heart to lead to action. I want closer daily proximity with those on the margins, with a disposition of attentive awe. The accatamiento to which G referred in his talk on Monday. That attention with affectionate awe. I want my daily proximity with those on the margins to lead me to see with the eyes of God, with tenderness, kinship, and love. Now that may be swinging for the fences, especially in my case. Just ask my brother, Toby, right? But I'm grateful to G for being a living example of how that's done. So a few reminders before we begin. As always, please silence your cell phones. We're not clear on if there's... Okay, we do have remote viewing today in Loud Hall, all right? So looks like we've still got seats here, so that's good. Thank you again for your continued generous giving to the Bayview Worship Program. Our good friends at the tables in the back can direct you however you care to donate. Many of you have asked how to support the good work of Homeboy Industries. And the easiest way is through their beautiful and easy to navigate website, which is homeboyindustries.org. And on the front page is a large donate button, which will direct you through the process quite easily. Lastly, out on the back tables, there is a lost but not found table. So if you think you lost something, be sure and check that out. Or even if you don't think you lost something, you may have. So go check that out. All right, please rise as you're able and let's sing hymn number 557 together. Blessed be the tie that binds. Please pray with me. Have a seat for you. Sorry. Lord of heaven and earth, glorious God who knows and sees all we do and need, we honor you with all our beings, lately in our working for the good of your kingdom, and now in the rest of your loving presence. May this day be full of your joy, your love, and your stillness, that all creation may see your goodness in our midst and that we may know it very well. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in welcoming back, once again, Father Greg Boyle.
I never considered myself in the category of those who are able to stand. It's funny, you get to that moment where you go, this is actually difficult. First of all, let me just thank all of you. This community is extraordinary. Homie sent me an Instagram the other day, and it was the Pope speaking to immigrants. And he was speaking in Spanish, and it had a translation on the screen. It said, "Dear migrants, I bow to your dignity." And so Feline and Jorge and myself, we bow to your dignity, just as you have to us during our amazing time here. So you are so generous and open-hearted and welcoming. They all went diving off of some lighthouse, something or other. Trust me, I was in bed, asleep. And then they went canoeing or kayaking or some damn thing this morning. I can't even believe it, so I can't believe you're actually here, so I bow to your stamina. If somebody asked me, I'll just get that out of the way because I always forget it. So someone said, is Homeboy duplicated elsewhere? And so in 2008, when we opened our current and fourth location in Chinatown, Los Angeles, we started getting all these delegations. Those are all those tours we have, like 8 times a day. And then the first one was from Wichita, and they had come to me and said, could you airlift Homeboy into Wichita? And so we kind of raised an issue that we hadn't really faced before. So I called my staff together and I said, do we want to become the McDonald's of gang intervention programs with over 5 billion gang members served? And so they said no, and I think that was right. So we said, we'll give you what we will call technical assistance. So there are 300 programs in the United States, loosely, roughly modeled on Homeboy, and 30 outside the country. We call them partners in the global Homeboy network. So we gather, in fact, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday is our next gathering. So we meet for 3 days, always around this time of year. And it's first come, first served. It's like usually about 350 people from all over the world who are our partners. And we have keynotes and panel discussions and workshops and breakout things. And then people report in, Legacy Coffee Shop in Denver, or Rise Up Industries in San Diego, or Braveheart Industries in Glasgow, Scotland. They come and they tell us, how they're doing, and everybody. It's quite an extraordinary gathering. So that's the answer to that question about, are you duplicating? So that's how we do it. At Homeboy, there's a process to get into our 18-month program, which is a paid gig. And so you drug test, and a week later you go to orientation. And then a week after that, you're interviewed, and then you await a start date. So I was sitting at my desk, and a guy came in who was next. He was called in to see me, and African-American gang member, 20 years in prison, and tattooed, and a juvenile tried as an adult. So he came in, so right off the bat, he qualifies to be in our program. So. But he was just exceedingly nervous. I don't know what that was. He was just like trembling. He was so shy and nervous, could hardly make eye contact. And then, I'm right on a piece of paper as I do, drug test any Friday at 10. And then I put my G And that indicates that they've been approved to begin the process. So I'm trying to make him at ease because he's just really shy and uncomfortable, I think. And so I'm writing the note, drug test any Friday. And I said, how'd you hear about Homeboy? And he said, oh, some female told me about it. I said, oh, I kept writing. Yeah, she said that you fathered all her children. I stopped writing. Say what now? And then it was almost like he could see the words floating above my desk. He goes, well, no, that can't be right. You baptized all her children. I go, thank you. That is a tad different. So kind of a recap, and Jamie, you recapped beautifully, thank you. We're kind of, we are on the lookout for the things that rhyme with our God, because we're all siblings of divine love. We're connected. Everybody unshakably good, no exceptions. We belong to each other, no exceptions. And so we want to know this God who loves us without measure and without regret, who is too busy loving us to be concerned with anything else, like disappointment or such. And so I think it's important to always be on the lookout for things that rhyme with God. Yeah, God is like that. I had anointed a woman, a pal of mine, Esperanza. She was one of the mothers of the projects, and she was kind of on her last day with pancreatic cancer. And so I was there on a Saturday, and I knew her mainly through her two sons, who were both gang members. One of them, quite the knucklehead. JC was the knucklehead, and Vince was a calmer version of gang member. And so, it was very beautiful. There were so many people, and I passed the oil around so they could anoint her. It was very moving. And then Vince and JC walked me out to the car, and and we're just leaning on my car, and we're telling stories, and we're laughing, and we're crying, and it was just beautiful. And JC remembered something that Esperanza's mom would visit him every Sunday at Central Juvenile Hall, and he spent a lot of time there, and she never missed. And one day he told me that she was sitting across from him at one of these kind of picnic benches that they have inside the unit for visits. And they're staring at each other, not really talking. And it's like, she can't take her eyes off her kid. Behold the one beholding you and smiling. And in Spanish, she asks him, is the guard looking? And he says no. And then very deftly, she reaches into her bra and she pulls out a still warm burrito. And then JC says, from Alan B's, the special ones, the chile relleno ones. And I go, wow, this is like a landmark in Boyle Heights. And she reaches out very deftly, hands it to her kid, and he puts it under the table. And when the guard's not looking, he's taking a bite and puts it back. And I don't know, call me crazy, but I just think, that's the kind of God we have, who just wants to reach into her bra and hand you a still warm burrito. I don't know. I just think it helps to come up with images where you go, yeah, it's more like that than exacting and demanding and judging. It's really way more than that. All the while, can't take her eyes off of him. And I think that's kind of key. But we do battle all the time, because we want to, once you know the God of love, you really want to fire all the other gods. Because, what our three experience during these days with you is that you know how to breathe in the spirit that delights in your being which enables you to breathe that out into the world. And we've been on the receiving end of that, exhaling. It's so essential, because sometimes we think the end is just union, and God's going, no, keep going. Don't stop. Action. You got applause when you said the word action. That's what I'm talking about. It's not just, don't just sit there, do something. It's more than that. It's breathe in the Spirit that delights in your being and breathe it out into the world, because the world could use it. And that's why you do it. I was invited to kind of a Shishifufu high school. It was actually kind of a school that's K to 12, and it kind of an elite thing in Los Angeles. And I was invited because I have a board member, Ray Rodriguez, and his wife, Claudia, and the two of them invited me to please speak. We're going to have a thing with adults, parents, no kids, and maybe some faculty and stuff. So it was a packed auditorium, and it was in the evening. There was one kid, a kid named Diego, who was like 10 years old and mature beyond his years, and he's in the front row with Claudia. And I'm doing my talk, and if I say something funny, Diego's dying of laughter, and I go, wow, he's getting this, and then if I say something that kind of makes you go, that's interesting, he kind of made that face, And then at the end, when I told the story that I told yesterday about Puppet and Youngster, I look at the adults, and they're very discreetly flicking tears. Not Diego, he's sobbing. He's just, really gets to him, and he's just weeping. And sometimes when you give talks, you kind of float, and you're observing, an out-of-body experience. And I'm looking at him, and I go, wow, that is so interesting that he could feel so deeply all this stuff. Well, when he's sobbing, his mom, Claudia, sees that he is, and she very kind of discreetly just slowly reaches her arm and then rests it on his shoulder. And what he does next is really, stops the entire show. He turns to his mom and he says, "What?" Like that. Now, anyone who has raised a teenager or has been one knows exactly what that question means. Fill in the blank. What have I done to embarrass you? What would you like me to do? How have I brought shame to our family? It's all those things are packed into that one word, what? And then he realizes it was a showstopper. I stopped speaking because it was really quite loud. And then you'd think, maybe he'd demur, but he didn't that much. He looked at her and he said, "What?" Like that. And then she just continued to rest her arm on his shoulder. And it was abundantly clear that she had two messages that she wanted to convey. One, how did I get so lucky to have a kid like you? And two, what breaks your heart breaks mine too. And yet another image of the God we actually have. How much greater is the God we have than the God we think we have? Marinate in this a little bit. I don't think God wants us to do anything. He's not asking us to do something. He doesn't want us, he wants us to just receive him. And it's not about doing in that sense. That God expects nothing from us. He only wants for us. Which is, of course, what the mother wanted for her son. She just wanted him to be consoled and soothed. In the same way God doesn't want anything from us. Just for us. And I think that's important. Jesus doesn't say that he is the light of the world. He says that you are. And so the hope is that once you receive and breathe in the Spirit that delights in your being, then you can be a light that people can see by. And then you do it the way Jesus does, not by pointing things out, but by pointing the way. St. Ignatius of Loyola in the Spiritual Exercises has a meditation called the Two Standards. And in it, he says simply, see Jesus standing in the lowly place. And it's not Jesus standing outside the lowly place and pointing to it. Get your butts over to the lowly place. He's not pointing to the margins, just see him standing there. And then you want to lean in with curiosity. You want to go, what's he doing there? How's he feeling standing there? Why is he there? And then it's kind of, I want to be where you are. And then you want to see Jesus so that you can be Jesus. And you want to recognize the Christ in me recognizes the Christ in her. And that's how you want to live. The marrow of the gospel, as St. Francis of Assisi says. And so we want to be a light that people can see by. You know, it's funny, I get invited to speak at graduations, and I don't think any of you have ever been to a graduation where you didn't hear somebody say to the graduates, go out there and make a difference. And when I ever get up to speak after them, I always go, yeah, don't do that. Because if you go to the margins to make a difference, then it's about you, and it can't be about you. But if you go to the margins so that the folks at the margins make you different, then it's about us. And that's the hope. That's how you discover that we're all siblings of divine love. Can you go to the margins and allow folks there to alter your heart? Can you receive them? I was in Houston, and there was a homie after a talk. He was covered in tattoos and had been in prison, but now he's employed by the city of Houston to be a hardcore gang intervention worker. So he was out in the streets of Houston, and he, really good guy, and he pleaded with me very earnestly. He said, how do you reach them? Meaning gang members. And I found myself saying to him, for starters, stop trying to reach them. I mean, can you be reached by them? Can you listen and receive them? Because then that's eternally replenishing, and that's kind of the problem sometimes. You know, I had a woman who I didn't really know, but an acquaintance, I think I must have met her, but she wrote a book on self-care, and she said, could you write a blurb? You know how you write a blurb on the book cover? And I went, oh shoot, I don't really believe in it, you know, because kind of, I think it's a misconception, you know, because I remember senior staff members would come to me and said, oh, I just think I'm just too compassionate, and I'm gonna need 2 months off. And I go, well, I don't know how to break this to you. You have allowed this to become about you. And that's why you're pooped. That's why you can't do it anymore. That's the only reason why. Because then it's about outcomes, success, measurable whatevers, you know. And Mother Teresa says we're not called to be successful, we're called to be faithful. So then you find the thing you want to be faithful to love without measure and without regret, because that's how our God is with us. Okay, I'm going to do that. Then you don't really care about how things turn out, which is the way it's supposed to be. And then that's eternally replenishing. But if it's about success, outcome, the tally sheet of how many people you've saved or rescued, you're going to burn out. And you're going to be depleted all the time because it's about you. I mean, I think it's a subtle thing, but I think, you know, that's helped me. So, I've never had an experience like this in my entire 72 years of living. Most things are, you make a decision, you say a commitment, a vow, a New Year's resolution. I'm going to pray every morning, and meditate for this amount of time. And then, come 3 days later, you go, oh God, what happened to that, but that's our lives, there's once and for all is not a thing for us as human beings. It's one damn thing after another. It's the same damn thing. Not even one damn thing. It's the same damn thing. So there was a homie named Luis, but we called him Lulu, and he was a gang member, lived in Elisa Village housing projects, and he was sold crack, which is what people did, and until he became his own best customer. And then I would say, Lulu, you need help. Oh no, I'm okay, gee, thanks. Oh, you're very sweet. But then until finally he said, I need help. So I drove him to a rehab way up north of Los Angeles and deposited him there. And then 30 days later, I had to call him to tell him that his younger brother, also a gang member, also getting high, had done something that gang members don't do. He put a gun to his head and ended his life in front of his girlfriend. And homies normally do that by walking into harm's way and going into enemy territory hoping to die. So I called him, and obviously he was quite distraught. I said, Lulu, I'm going to go pick you up when the funeral comes, but I'm going to drive you right back. He goes, I want you to. I like how recovery feels. And so I do. I go up there, pick him up. He gives me a big abrazo. He gets in the car and he says, I had a dream last night and you were in it. And so, let's say, he says we were in a room, say a room this size, but no windows, no illuminated exit signs, no light creeping under any door, pitch black, silence, but he knows I'm there in the room somehow. And then in the silence, I reach into my pocket and I happen to have a flashlight and I aim it steadily on the light switch on the wall. And Lulu, in the telling of the dream, says, I know I'm the only one who can turn that light switch on. I'm really happy that you happen to have a flashlight. So with great trepidation, very slowly, he follows this beam of light, which I hold steadily without saying a word. And he gets to the light switch and he sighs a huge sigh and he flips the light switch on and the room is flooded with light. And now he's sobbing a lot. And he says, the light is better than the darkness. Like he did not know that to be the case. It changed my life forever. I can't think of a single thing in 72 years that changed my life forever. I've never returned to the craziness of my first 10 years of doing this work, where I was trying to turn the light switch on for people. No, crazy making, up all night on my bike, put that Uzi down, or sure you want to shoot that guy, and it's like crazy. And he told me that dream, and I've never been close to burnout since that moment. First 10 years I was constantly close to burnout. But I'd learned that lesson about it's eternally replenishing to just know that you own a flashlight, everybody does, and that you also know where to aim it, everybody does. And anybody who's had adult children who were addicts, no amount of you wanting your kid to find recovery will be the same as your kid wanting to find it. And so ours is a God who waits, and who are we not to? So that's, an important thing as we go to the margins, because it helps us to be eternally replenished. See Jesus standing in the lowly place. He's being replenished just by being there. and that's important. So in these days together, we've come home to our soul, the house that we really never left. And I think that's important. And then as I began on Monday about, this, like church, this time is not the place we've come to, it's the place we go from. And we go from here to walk people into wholeness, into the truth of who they are. We don't preach at them, we don't wag our finger at them, we don't warn them, we just remind them of who they are. Because everybody needs to be reminded, because who doesn't forget that? And all the while, I think there are two marks of authentic apostles, disciples. And it's joy and fearlessness. Reporters will ask me why I joined the Jesuits, and I always say, because the Jesuits were hilarious and prophetic. And that was a time during the Vietnam War, and that was what to me, I said, I'll have what they're having. But as I've 54 years a Jesuit, I think, it's joy and fearlessness. And those are kind of the touchstones. Once you know that, then you kind of see things differently about how you want to be church, how you want to be a community, how you want to be a light that people can see by. I'm an English major, so literature and poetry and stuff. But William Carlos Williams, who's an American poet, he says about poetry, if it ain't a pleasure, it ain't a poem. And that's kind of true of our own lives as Christians. There's something about it. It has to just be filled with joy. I was at dinner in my Jesuit community, so half of us work at Homeboy and half of us work at Dolores Mission, where Homeboy was born, and still a very poor parish. And the pastor, Brendan, was telling me that a woman came up to him and he said, my daughter asked me this question today. She said, how come we go to Dolores Mission now and not to that church we've been going to? And she said to her daughter, because the priest there is afraid, and he would like us to be afraid. And I thought, wow, that's extraordinary. And so the daughter said, so we come to Dolores Mission, so not to be afraid, we can be brave here? She goes, yes. But I thought that was quite telling, David French, a columnist for the New York Times, says there are two kinds of churches: the fear the world church or the love your neighbor church. And I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think every single one of you is aligned with the love your neighbor church and would step away from the fear, because you want things to be love driven, soaked with love, because that's the only way for us to walk each other home to wholeness and to the unshakable goodness that people forget about themselves. This will sound like a shameless name drop, but I don't mean it to be. So Jane Fonda is on my board, and she's a friend, and she's great. But she told this vignette at our board retreat, and I only repeat it because it's in her book, so it's public. But she said she was reading a book, which I was kind of touched by, on, scripture. And I don't know what book it was, but in the book it said, where Jesus says, be perfect as your Heavenly Father is perfect. And it said, well, perfect is, that's not the word. The word is wholeness. Be whole as your Heavenly Father's whole. It's about wholeness. And even in Spanish, salvar, is to save, but it's also to heal. It's about becoming whole. It's not getting some grand prize that sends you to heaven. No, it's about let's none of us are well until all of us are well. So she read that one line and she closed the book and she walked out of the room where she was reading the book and down the hall of her house, and she stepped into the living room and she just began to sob because she had realized, as all of us have, how our seeking perfection is really not at all what God hopes for us. And once you abandon the quest for perfection, you can embrace the search for wholeness. Because then it's not about us and them, it's about all of us are helping each other get to a place where we can be our true selves and loving. And that's the whole idea. Wholeness. In fact, that's our diagnosis sometimes, like Jesus has the demoniac who's naked and wild and just a big, huge, incredible Hulk, and and people try to chain him down, but he breaks through the chains, and people take another route to walk home because they don't want to go past this guy. For me, this always is the metaphor for homies, I think. People are frightened. And Jesus says, "What is your name?" And I was reading the Message Bible, and it said mob. But, legion is the one we hear more often, which is to say there are a lot of us. But the real translation is, "I am what afflicts me." And I always look at homies who identify with that they come to see that they think this is who they are. But it's our task to hold up the mirror and say, "No, look again. I know you think it's empty, but it's really fullness." And so we want people to see as Jesus helps. Systems change when people change, and people change when they are cherished. It's kind of why we use that word at Homeboy, because love gets so, it's hard to use sometimes because it just floats above your head. Sometimes it enters your heart, but if it's about cherishing love, you roll up your sleeves. It's love that has found its way to your feet, and that's why you use it. So then it's not the survival of the fittest, but the thriving of the nurtured. And as the poet says, when we have totally surrendered to that beauty, to the beauty of our unshakable goodness, when we have surrendered totally to that beauty, we shall be a mighty kindness. Then we start to see it's not about being less sinful, but more joyful. And it's kind of a decision even, which I think we can make. So the goal is wholeness, but not perfection. Many years ago, I got a call from the White House, from Laura Bush's office. She was the First Lady then, and her staffer said the First Lady would like you to speak at some youth conference or something that she was sponsoring at Howard University in D.C. And the staffer said, "Can you bring some homies, Now, whether the First Lady actually used the H word, I am not certain. And this is a digression, but not that long ago, maybe a year ago, I ran into a staffer for Laura Bush, and I was wondering, how did it happen? And do you know who Karl Rove is? Yeah, and George W. Bush used to affectionately call him Turd Blossom. And he was kind of a political operative or something. And he stuck his head in this staffer's door and said, "Hey, here's what I think you should do. The First Lady should visit Father Greg Boyle and Homeboy Industries," which I went, wow, anyway, neither here nor there, but I digress. I promise you lots of rabbit holes before I finish here. So anyway, so I picked 3 homies, Gus, Gabriel, and Herbert, to go with me to D.C., and we were going to stay with my brother and his wife who lived there. And, so Gabriel was our premier, and I think our first tour guide. He was just such a good tour guide. He's a big guy, stocky guy with a lot of tattoos, but kind of a Colgate smile, very charming. And he would greet the people at the front door. And he'd walk them through and introduce them to case managers and navigators and hand them goggles to watch tattoos being removed in our clinic. And then giving them hair nets so they could go into the bakery and watch rivals, enemy gang members making croissants together. Boy, was he a good tour guide. And so I take the 3 of them to, do you remember Men's Warehouse? Yeah, you're going to like the way you look. I guarantee it. Yeah, I'm dating myself there. But, well, that guy wasn't there. But we, they got suits, and they went to the dressing rooms. And I was looking at ties and stuff. And Gabriel comes out, and I see him in front of the mirror. And he just can't take his eyes off of himself. And he's like gobsmacked. And I go over to him, I go, "How you doing?" And he goes, "Damn, gee, I'm pinching myself. I can't believe I'm in a suit. I can't believe I'm going to the White House." And like a little kid, he's so innocent. So, we go and I pick the 3 of them up, and we're halfway to the airport, and to nobody in particular, "Hey, all you guys have IDs?" Silence. A lone voice from the back seat, "Shit. It's Gus, we have to go back." So anyway, so we tour and stuff, and then the day comes for the suits, the day comes for the White House and the conference. And all of a sudden I can hear from the basement in my brother's house, he's set up all these rooms. Many homies have gone, and homegirls have gone with me to stay there. And I hear this voice, "I don't got no pants." And, well, apparently Gabriel, when he was running to the car with his bag here and his suit covered in plastic from Men's Warehouse, opened at the bottom. As he's running, it jostled the pants and they slithered off the hanger and fell into the gutter or something. And some homeless man is liking the way he looks. I guarantee it. So my sister-in-law, Joyce, she jerry-rigs a pair of my brother's gray pants, and it worked fine. Anyway, we go to the conference, we speak. Then afterwards, we go to the White House. And wow, certainly crooks have resided in that house before, but I think this was the first time gang members had ever stepped foot in it. And it was like string quartets and brass little things and music and a buffet like I've never seen in my life, that rack of lamb, salmon the size of a duffel bag, They had these little small fingerling like potatoes cut in half, a hole carefully bore out in the middle, stuffed with caviar, chive, creme fraiche. And so I went back like 9 times. And at one point, Gabriel's standing next to me, and he's surveying the thing. What should he eat next? And he grabs one of those potato guys, and he pops that sucker in his mouth. And he's chewing. And he spits it, the whole mess, into a napkin. And he says, "This shit tastes nasty." And let me just say, he was not using his inside voice at the time. And was it me, or did the Secret Service lunge ever so? So anyway, I told you all that to tell you this. We were flying home the next day to Los Angeles, and somewhere in mid-flight, Gabriel turns to me, and he goes, "I gotta go to the baño." And I go, "Well, it's at the back of the plane." A half hour later, he comes back, and I go, "¿Qué pasó? I thought you fell in, okay?" "Oh, I was talking to that lady back there." So I turn around and I can see the flight attendant standing at the back of the plane. And then he says, I made her cry. I hope that's okay. I go, well, Gabriel, it might depend on what you actually said to her, you know. And he said, well, she saw my homeboy shirt and she saw my tattoos. I don't know. She asked me a gang of questions. So I gave her a tour of the office at 37,000 feet. Gabriel hands her goggles to watch tattoos being removed. Gives her a hairnet so she can see enemies baking bread together. And I told her last night we made history. For the first time in the history of this country, 3 gang members walked into the White House. We had dinner there. I told her the food tasted nasty. And she cried. I said, well, Gabriel, what you expect? She just caught a glimpse of you. She saw that you are somebody. She recognized you as the shape of God's heart. People cry sometimes when they see that. And the soul feels its worth. This is God's dream come true. You breathe in the spirit that delights in your being, and then you breathe it out into the world because the world could use it. Gabriel could use it. The flight attendant could as well. And then it's exquisitely mutual, which, again, parentheses, is exactly what the 3 of us have experienced here with all of you. Exquisitely mutual. And that's God's dream come true. The poet says, now could be the moment when we fall apart or we become whole. And that's exactly where we are. We get to decide. We get to choose joy. We get to choose to be a love your neighbor church. And so we cease to argue with an existing model, and we just go ahead and fashion a new one. Let's do it. We don't want to circle the wagons anymore. We want to widen the circle. Let's do that. And the truth is, with love, both Feline and Jorge just underscored that. It said it's all about this one thing, love. I know that feels, obvious to all of us, but it kind of isn't. And with love, we repurpose our lives for positivity. And then you're just constantly in your own practice, in your own rendezvous in the morning with God. You give in to the love that is eternally in love with you. And that's what you hope. And that's why you go out. That's why you take action. Because another poet says, I always say when the poet says, when I can't remember who the poet is. Anyway, Google them. The poet says, whenever we wash the world's feet, our hands stop shaking. So it's kind of like the antidote to our fear. It's what enables us to stand with Jesus in the lowly place. And we don't get saved from ourselves, but to ourselves. And that's really important. There's a homie named Miguel Lugo who's in charge of security, and he's Native American, juvenile tried as adult, like 18 years in prison, 10 of those years in solitary confinement, and at Pelican Bay, which is like the most notorious prison in California. And he and his wife went on a trip. They were driving in, and got way up north, like near Crescent City, which is where Pelican Bay is. He goes, let's pull in here. So they pulled into the parking lot, and some guard freaked out. You can't be here. You don't belong here. And he told the guard, he rolled down his window and told the guard, I've been waiting 20 years for somebody to tell me that. He's such a wise figure. I've traveled with him many times. We went to Darwin, Australia with another homie. And we've been to, the res many times. He's just a wisdom figure. But he's in our council, and I remember not that long ago. So in council, it's all homies, senior staff, and you're always talking about trainees who are coloring outside the lines. What do we do? What's good for him? And so they'll say things like, well, I think he needs to be suspended for 30 days. Well, we need to give him his final check. How else will he know? And I think he needs to go to rehab. And inpatient, not outpatient. Those kinds of things. And then Miguel just sits there like a Buddha. And he says, yeah, who knows? Who knows what's good for me? Who knows what's good for you? Who knows what's good for her? All I know is all of us together, we're good for each other. And I thought, yeah, that's exactly right. So one day I'm in my office and talking to a couple homies who are sitting in front of my desk. And again, I can see everybody from my window. And, the reception area is packed. And we have a thing called the Well, which is a little kind of counter. And 3 or 4 homies and homegirls sit behind it, and they sign people in, and people fill out an intake form. And I don't know what happens. So they do all these things. And I see this guy, and I first see the faces of the homies and homegirls, and they look stricken, like something's up. And the guy has a soda can, and he's punctuating his conversations. You know what the point is, and soda's flying out onto the counter, and they're looking like... So I know that this is a combo burger of meth and madness. So I'm going to have to get up and deal with him. So I stand up when all of a sudden Miguel comes with this huge guy with security on his back of his shirt, and he walks him outside. And so later on I asked him, well, hey, what was that about? And he said that he was talking to the guy, and he says, how about you and me, we walk down to Olvera Street and I'll buy you some tacos. And the guy slowly lifts his shirt to reveal a gun tucked into the front of his pants. He said, how about I put a bullet in your head? And he lets his shirt drop. And Miguel looks at him and he goes, 2 tacos or 3? And so the 2 of them walk down to Olvera Street, which is like 3 blocks. And he goes, the guy's having a conversation with the voices in his head. Shoot his ass. No, he's okay. You can't trust him. He's buying me tacos back and forth, And he gets there and he buys 3 tacos and he hands them the plate. The guy takes 1 taco and he defiantly throws it on the ground. And then he eats the other 2 tacos. Because like all of us, he's hungry. And we want to obey what love is asking of us. And that's a good example. When you know your goodness, you live a life awake to God's presence. I love Mary Oliver, a poet, and she died at like 84 or something. And before she died, she said, these are the 3 things I've learned. 1, pay attention. 2, be astonished. 3, share your astonishment. I know I join all of you in saying how heartened we all were when the 2 of them shared their astonishment with us. And so the goal is to create a community of kinship such that God might recognize it. I had two homies and we flew to Sacramento and we were going to speak at a Crystal Ray school there. But I had masses and stuff on Sunday, so we left later than I like. And so we got there, Sacramento was dark, and we got on that, the rental car shuttle bus to go to the rental car place. And it was me, Robert, and then Carlos, but nobody calls him Carlos, we call him Chamuco, which is an affectionate name for the devil, because Carlos has two very black devil's horns tattooed on his forehead, along with lots of other tattoos. And so Robert and I are towards the back of the bus, but we're facing each other. But Chamuco goes to the very back and sits in the back thing, and then people board the bus, and they're sitting down. But I'm watching them when they go see where Chamuco is, and they do this little foxtrot. Whoa, no! I think I'll sit somewhere else. And until finally, there are only 2 seats left on the whole bus, on either side of Chamuco. And they go, oh, so we sit down next to them, and not one bit happy. And so we start to go, and it's very dark, and it's not lit, and it's very wooded, and it's very odd that way. And so somewhere in mid-trek, the shuttle bus conks out. It just stops in the middle of the thing. And the odd part about it was everybody was silent, which seems strange to me. And it's, you can hear the driver, the woman, she's click, click. I'm working on it, and nobody's saying a word in this dark, wooded, very secluded area. When suddenly a voice comes from the last row, and it's Chamuco. And he says, I saw this in a movie once. It does not end well. And I have to tell you that the entire bus exploded in the most unanimous laughter, which was kind of extraordinary, because I need to tell you that it was the Sunday after the Tuesday in November when Donald Trump won the first time. And I remember thinking to myself, I bet half the people on this bus voted one way, and half the people on this bus voted another way. And suddenly kinship so quickly. Now could be the moment when we fall apart or become whole. One last story in 2 minutes. So there was a kid named Danny, and he had made a solemn vow to me once. I will never step foot in Homeboy Industries. And so in gang recovery, like drug recovery, it takes what it takes. It can be the death of a friend, the birth of a son, the long stretch in prison, to kind of walk through Homeboy, And for Danny, he never came to Homeboy, but I knew him at juvenile hall and probation camps. Finally, at 18, he went to prison just for 2 years. And when he got out, it takes what it takes. And he discovered that his mom had 6 months to live with pancreatic cancer. And he became the hospice caregiver, so tender with her, which was all the more remarkable because she had been decidedly less than tender with him. Torturous, really, as he was growing up. So I went and I anointed her, and a week later she died. A week after that, I buried her, and a week after that, he stepped foot for the first time into Homeboy Industries. And I watched him inhabit the truth of who he was. I watched him, as we say there, laugh from the stomach. I watched him work side by side with guys I know he used to shoot at. One day he comes into my office and he begins very dramatically, what happened yesterday has never happened to me in my life. And he says that he got on the orange line across the street. Chinatown stopped to take it east, and he said the train was packed. And but he managed to get a seat. But standing right in front of him, holding a pole, he said, was a medio pedo guy, a guy who was a little bit drunk. And he had tattoos on his hand, older homie, he didn't know who he was. And Danny's wearing a sweatshirt that says Homeboy Industries, jobs not jails. And the little bit drunk guy says, you work there? And Danny says, yeah, I do. And the guy says, is it any good? And Danny shrugs and he goes, well, it's helped me. In fact, I don't think I'm going to go back to prison because of this place. And then he gets up and he fishes out a piece of paper and a pen, and he very carefully writes the address of Homeboy Industries. And as he's telling me this story, he goes, I couldn't believe I knew the address by heart. and when he's done, he hands it to the guy, and he sees the guy, and he says, you come see us. We'll help you. And the guy sees Danny, and he takes the piece of paper and he says, thank you. And the train stops, the guy gets off, and Danny sits down. And then he returns to that earlier refrain. What happened to me next has never happened to me in my life. Everyone on the train was staring at me. Everyone on the train was nodding at me. Everyone on the train was smiling at me. And now he can barely speak. And for the first time in my life, I felt admired. And everyone on that train, together, decided to breathe in the spirit that delights in their being, and then decided to breathe it out into the world. They didn't argue with an existing model. They were just fashioning a new one. And sometimes when you wash the world's feet, your hands stop shaking, and suddenly we're whole. And suddenly we all discover that all of us are good for each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much for being here.
Actually, it's not. Sit down just a second. Turn this back on. Thanks. Hey, thank you so much for being here. I want to invite you back next week. We've got a speaker named Ashley Island who works and ministers in Grand Rapids. She's been a pastor. She's an author. She's been a school administrator, and I want to tell you about her books because they dovetail so beautifully with what you've done with us this week, G.